to the Weekly Bioanalysis, a KCAS podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 90th episode of the Weekly Bioanalysis, the official podcast of KCAS Bio. KCAS Bio is a bioanalytical CRO serving the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries for over 40 years. My name is John Perkins and I've been in the bioanalytical LCMS space for around 30 years. I'm here with my co-host, Dominic Warrino.
Hi, Dominic, Warrino, subject matter expert in ligand binding assays and biomarkers, and I've been in this space for about 30 years as well.
Dominic and I are members of the growing scientific advisory team at KCAS Bio. Either or both of us are available to answer any questions you may have regarding this podcast or any of KCAS Bio's services. Today we're here with a couple of guests, Maria Nelson, Chief Financial Officer, and Julie Deane, Chief People Officer at KCAS, for an action-packed main topic discussion. We're thrilled to have you listening to our 90th episode of the podcast, which is now available virtually everywhere. Wherever you choose to find and play your podcast, you can now likely find the Weekly Bioanalysis. We welcome all of you, whether you are joining us for the first time or if you're a regular listener. Today's podcast will be a review of the latest news and resources, and then a focus on the topic of our choosing before discussing any feedback we've had from you. We're constantly looking for topics and we'd be happy to discuss something that you want us to cover. So again, we're fired up to have you here and we're looking forward to a fun episode today. To kick us off for podcast number 90, Dominic is going to go over today's podcast topic a bit before we jump into the news and resources section. Dom.
Yeah, John, as you kind of mentioned, we've got a couple special guests joining us, and our Chief Financial Officer, Maria Nelson, and our Chief People Officer, Julie Deane. We're going to go over KCAS strategies for balancing growth with a good employee experience. This is part 2. If you listened to part 1 was our previous podcast. And so the agenda is jam-packed. After we go over some news and resources, we're going to talk about the main portion. We'll look at each of our guests will be able to give an introduction, and then we'll talk about building a scalable HR. And then we'll look at measuring efficiency and planning for capacity, which is what we call the CURE. And then we'll look at for how we hire and talent acquisition, followed by onboarding, training, development, and maintaining employee engagement. And last but not least, our internal communications and our multi-site centralization. So with that, John, I'll throw it back to you.
So this is something that's been out in the news for recently at least, but OSE shares 65% overall survival rate between cancer vaccines phase 2 win. Basically, OSE Immunotherapeutics has shared survival data behind the therapeutic vaccines phase 2 pancreatic cancer win, as the French biotech continues to point to its pipeline and a product potential. I remember seeing something about this in past, about a couple of months ago maybe, about this. I think it's an mRNA vaccine for pancreatic cancer, so it's potentially very exciting, particularly because pancreatic cancer is a very difficult cancer to treat. And so basically they have a off-the-shelf, what they call it, neoepitope-based vaccine, and they administered it alongside a chemotherapy compared to chemotherapy alone among 107 patients with advanced or metastatic pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma with no progression after 8 cycles of FOLFIRINOX induction chemotherapy. They said back in March it hit its primary endpoint of overall survival, but they've actually gone into more detail with data. And specifically the 54 patients who received the Tidopi-Kerith chemotherapy combination saw a 12-month overall survival rate of 65%. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, right, John? So I've talked about, or maybe I have, cells in a ball is what this is, right? So these are, when they say an off-the-shelf neoepitope-based vaccine, right? That's pretty cool, John. They don't really talk in this article too much about specifically what that off-the-shelf vaccine.
Well, they say further down, they say it combines 10 neoepitopes derived from 5 tumor antigens, selected for the presence in a range of tumors, offering a multi-target pipeline and a product approach for HLA-A2 positive patients to address unmet needs in oncology, and that's from the Chief Clinical and Medical Research Officer at OSE. They're also, this is pancreatic cancer, but they're also looking to do the same in non-small cell lung cancer as well, and ovarian cancer is also expected as a phase 2 readout next year.
So it's a pancreatic cancer is really hard to treat,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
that the organ itself is so soft, right? So it makes it really hard to treat it. And one of the other things about it is the neoepitopes are fascinating because it's not cells; it's just actually like the shedding of a cell line is typically what they use here. So they probably got these different cell lines that produce tumor-associated antigens, and they're making this gamish to turn it into a vaccine, which is really, really it's really powerful stuff, but it's a bioanalytical nightmare, is what I'll say, John. I can't imagine trying to do the BioA on this. But really, if I read this right, it's actually with a chemotherapeutic, right? Is that kind of how this is?
That was how the study was constructed. So they basically had overall they had 50. So they had they'd compared survival with their vaccine plus the chemotherapy versus chemotherapy alone, and they sort of said that the survival time amongst patients in the chemotherapy only cohort was actually longer than expected as well. I'm not sure why that happened, but they saw survival of 17 months chemotherapy alone versus 21 months with the vaccine and in chemotherapy. So it was an improved outcome versus the chemotherapy alone.
Yeah, that on the surface sounds surprising, but
Yeah.
sometimes chemotherapeutics can actually have adverse effects on adaptive immune responses, right? So you're kind of without it, it may be actually augmenting the patient's immune system more and having more benefits. So it might be actually better not to have it there if you think of it that way, because sometimes a chemotherapeutic can cause some negative effects. It's toxic, right? You're given some sort of chemotherapeutic by nature; it's killing things. So even though fascinating, what I'll again, outside of it being a bioanalytical really a challenge here, as you can imagine, think about the immunogenicity of this, right? If you're doing 10 neotypes from 5 different tumor antigens, it's kind of like a pan-gamish, and these types of trials have been around for quite some time now. A lot of them sometimes don't make it as far as phase 2. I've worked on a few in my lifetime, and really cool stuff. But it's incredibly promising, and I think when you think because of the nature of the etiology of the disease, right? Pancreatic cancer, things that are stomach cancers, lung cancers, they all have that tissue level of it that cause a lot of it's notoriously hard to treat because of how vastly different each individual can be. And then just think about where it is in the pancreas can be. Hey, am I going to this part of it, or what specific portion of the pancreas is becoming cancerous? So they've taken a really wide net with these 10 different neoepitopes, and really, really cool stuff here. John, I don't know much else to add other than
I'm going to say I must be mistaken because I think there's another vaccine out there is mRNA based. It's not this, so I'll look out for that for another time because I know I read about that in the past. But let's move on to the next
really
topic.
cool, John. Good survival rate of it, and it looks promising. Yep. And it is like all we talk about is ADCs and things like that. It's good to see some other vaccine types kind of making their way to phase 2.
Yep, absolutely. And this is just as an investor referred to this. This is pure science fiction. But it's basically rebooting dead human brains. Biotech seeks to reinvent drug testing work, and this is a couple of guys at the Yale School of Medicine who were the founders, and basically they've figured out how to keep brains from donated brains, how to keep them alive on a cellular and molecular level. And basically what the hope is that will really help with neuro drugs development. They basically feed the brains with artificial blood so they can sustain the cells for roughly a day. But they are dead. There's nothing in terms of consciousness or anything. And the hope is that this can hopefully overcome limitations of animal studies for neurological and psychological diseases. They started off with pig brains, showed they could restore cellular activity in the brains of decapitated pigs, and as they said, would restore molecular activity and metabolism. And they basically moved it to brains, and they're starting to collaborate with biotechs on this. And I'll let you comment, and we'll talk through a bit more of the examples, etc.
Yeah, John, I'm just a little. It almost feels like it's like the Reanimator movie. I'm going to date
Exactly, yeah.
You remember that one from a long time ago? The guy's walking around with his head, right? It was crazy. I think it might have influenced me as a scientist, almost like, wow, that's so cool. Can that really be done? Well, John, I guess it kind of is. I see a lot of value in this in terms of, I can't quite tell if it's to help reduce animal models. Is that part of this, or is it more
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah? And then it has to have some help with like stroke victims and emergency patients and things like that, right? But it's really cool to be able to study a live system, right? In lieu of, well, not a live system, but what a great, when we talk about how um, AI may get itself involved and all the things we want to do to maybe limit the amount of preclinical work we do. This has it a lot of, and then even in the gene therapy space, the CAR T cell space, the cell mediated gene therapy space, the effector immune cell space, whatever it's called today, right? They use a lot of cell lines that they try to challenge. And so if I'm going to treat somebody with colorectal cancer, I'll take a couple colorectal cancer cell lines and see if my CAR T can attack them, right? That's kind of, or my immune effector cells can destroy them in vitro. This has way bigger implications on supporting that, right? Because I think it's just the brain, but imagine this goes on to other things. And I'll pass it back to you because it's a pretty long article here, so it's very
It
interesting.
is. I mean, it's basically so yeah. So the point they make is that obviously the brain's very complex, but it's very different from animal brains. So that they basically saying that drugs for brain conditions have one of the industry's high failure rates. But they've been used. Obviously they're using they're feeding it with artificial CSF and blood, and then whatever's coming out, they're analysing what's coming out because they want to try and build up. Like sort of their plan is to build up almost like a metabolomics type approach in terms of identifying biomarkers of how a drug might affect the brain. So it's
Wow.
it's an alternative approach. I mean, they make the point in the article they're effectively a CRO working with like neuro companies, and one example is Biohaven. If I just find the Biohaven piece, because that was what jumped out to me. It's like, so they were looking testing an experimental Biohaven drug to untangle proteins that form problematic clumps in neurodegenerative diseases like ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. Too much of the drug can prevent proteins. Sorry. Yeah, let me say that again. They did this with Biohaven, and Bexor worked with Biohaven, testing their drug to untangle proteins that form problematic clumps in neurodegenerative diseases like ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. But too much of the drug can prevent proteins that are supposed to pair up from doing so. So they've got this fine balance. It is obviously a narrow therapeutic window, and this approach was able to really define that window for Biohaven. They also, through the work, this is a really nice example, actually, revealed about another of their programs where they had two drug designs that appeared equivalent in test tube studies, but one didn't have activity at all in these brains. At Bexorg's the name of the company, by the way, and the company that did work moved some potential biomarkers in the opposite direction to what was expected, likely due to a complex interplay of different types of brain cells shuttling a metabolite between each other that isn't captured when studying neurons in a lab dish. And so one of the two main people at Bexorg, I apologize for the pronunciation, is Zvonimir Verselya is one of them, and the other guy is Nenad Sestan. They're both Croatians and obviously now at Yale. And yeah, it's basically by taking this approach that they're able to give information that there isn't really another mechanism for helping out with this. And so for Biohaven, they're working small molecule, but another long-term thought is, can we use what they're doing with the brain to sort of assess how we can possibly get large molecules to penetrate the brain, which is obviously a major problem for drug developers.
Yeah, John, it is fascinating what they're doing here, and it's important to emphasize that just how hard it is to thread the needle between
Mhm.
neurological disorders where you're trying to maybe mop up a given protein in there and or trying to put one in, and just how I guess like symbiotic communicative the whole system is that actually can block its efficacy if you add too much, right? It kind of, I think that works. It often happens in biologics or anything you might give sub Q, but in the neurological setting, it's even more of a challenge. And this seems to maybe overcome some of that. It's in such its early stages; they really don't give you a whole lot of information about the mechanism and how it's working and all that good stuff. But it's this, John. It feels like this is close to being revolutionizing. It's Nobel Prize like over time. If
Well,
I
I think someone made the point that you're right. This is a long article, so I'm jumping out trying to find pieces. Um, someone said the individual projects, they're not earth shattering. They will not make headlines, but the sum total is big news because it's potentially moving a lot things along much faster, much more effectively without the use of so many research animals, especially primates. And like we say, there's a big push to try and cut down on an animal usage, and here's at least one mechanism. I mean, this is, if you read through it, they can't keep the brain sustained for very long. I think it's like they need the brain pretty fresh, and then they've got like 24 hours they can keep it sustained and functioning. But beyond that, then it declines, and the value of the data they get is gone. So it's obviously their logistics must be very challenging in
yeah.
terms of identifying sources and then getting them delivered such that they can immediately line them up to do whatever testing they have ready
Yes.
to go. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that it doesn't really have an impact on us right now, but it is fascinating, and if it helps drive, research for conditions that are increasingly impact an aging population, then it'll be fascinating to see, if we hear more about this company and where they go from here.
Yeah, no, that was well said, John. Reading, as it certainly has a lot of, like, right now, it's not going to win a Nobel Prize, but I think if we flash forward 50, 60 years, wherever it might take, right? So there's two things it's doing. One is it's the translation between the preclinical to clinical, John. How valuable is some of that, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, even if you do if you do a rodent species, a larger species, presumably a non-human primate of some sort, it's still everything you learn there. It's helpful, but it doesn't like this. If we could take for instance, a brain or maybe whatever other organ you're trying to treat or other system and do it artificially in a human organ, right? That should translate a lot better. So there's that first kind of component, but I do think it doesn't really talk about it too much, other than that they're partnering with Biohaven. That's the drug therapeutic PI here, because they're not really these people weren't interested in treating people. They wanted to develop a new, like, kind of tool for
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
so
Because
the
like it's
Bexorg, right? That's their platform. The Bexorg people have this platform that they can use now, and again, it's using brains, and they've got proprietary way to kind of keep them alive and all this great stuff. But now it's like, oh, if I'm in the neurospace, I can go. Then it's like, can it jump into other things, right, John? I think that's the gist of what they're saying here. But I'll end on this as a couple things. I always think about we were young scientists. I talk to a lot of young scientists. To me, this is the wave of the future here. You've still got to be a good scientist in whatever discipline. I chose immunology. If you choose chemistry, biochemistry, molecular, whatever it might be, you still have to learn I call it the foundation of it, but the execution on it is going to change, John, right? The laboratory work in another 50 years isn't going to be what we envision today. And this is where I'd invest my time. I'd get to know AI. I'd start to learn about alternative models for use in preclinical. That's, to me, is any young scientists out there listening, that's what I would go back and tell a 25-year-old version of me today, where when I was 25, someone said invest in biologics and autologous T cells. So there you go, John. I'll end on that, but it's a really fascinating just advancement, and it's such a hot topic, with a lot of discussion around, some desire to reduce preclinical work, and I think Bexor will be a player in this field.
Yeah,
John.
I really like the quote from the investor. He basically said, "I couldn't believe what I was hearing. David Bayer, an investor at Amplify Partners who contributed to Bexor $20 million seed funding, told Endpoints, I am drawn to the weirdest things that just sound like science fiction, and Bexor is honestly one of the closest things to investing in science fiction."
I mean, I started with Reanimator. We both, I don't know what that is, but that is I mean, it's not a movie you can go watch now, but it was something we all watched in the 80s, right, John? It was fascinating. I don't know. Well, anyhow, John, any closing parts on this one? And I know we've got a couple guests, so I don't know if we had one more news article or what.
I still think I'm just going to say one more thing. It is interesting that, obviously we're sort of talking about the brain thing and nothing's been revived, etc., etc. But part of their, in terms of setting up the company, they recruited several academic researchers to a bioethics board to advise the company on thorny issues of consciousness, consent from family members, and any other questions that the research raises. And so they're being very, very careful about this. And I think, like I say, I really enjoyed reading about all that, and it'll definitely be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, we don't want a HeLa incidents going on, right? That's I think that's their worry here. If you remember the HeLa cell line and all the controversy around that cervical cancer cell line, which just got settled recently, John, if you know what I'm referring to, where a cancer
I don't actually know.
Cancer patient back in the 60s, they used her they resected her cervical cancer and developed a cell line out of it that every university and I actually worked on that cell line as when I was at Pitt. I could buy it from ATCC. It was a good model for cervical cancer, and that whole thing just recently got settled because she never really consented for it. And so
yeah, there's a few examples out there of patient zeros that were things taken without people's consent, etc. Let's move on anyway.
Well, it looks like we got one more here. It's fortuitous. I always step in it a little bit. I talked about young researchers, and you're kind of going to tell us a little bit.
This again, but given our guests, I thought this was a good news item to throw out there. This was social media content may attract Gen Z to pharma jobs. This is a report from the UK, basically saying farmers looking to recruit younger workers should meet members of Generation Z when they're at namely TikTok and Instagram, according to a new report from the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. It was basically surveying teenagers and young adults aged 16 to 25 and STEM teachers, academic career counsellors in the UK, plus a STEM-centric focus group of 14 to 25-year-olds. And they found that drug makers could benefit from greater outreach to job hunters, as only 17% of those surveyed said they felt they had a broad or good understanding of what pharma companies do beyond developing medicines. The rest of the group maxed out an awareness of some company names without knowing what those companies do beyond making meds, and more than 20% surveyed said no real understanding of the UK pharma industry at all. And as it goes into it, it really talks that, if the social media is hugely important in terms of finding the information, and for a lot of around 50% of them, it was like TikTok and Instagram were the source of the information they were looking for, and LinkedIn, about 36% of people were looking for information for careers and things like that. I mean, it basically said that the resources they've used to decide on a potential career, close behind job search websites and ahead of more traditional things like career fairs, school career portals, and company websites. That's when TikTok and Instagram kick in. So it's showing for that generation how important these approaches are.
Yeah, it's I mean, right? I feel like 16 to 25. Got a son in that age. He's a STEM student as well. He works with a dad who's in the drug development business, and I bet you if I asked him this question, he might fall in that 80th percentile, right? Maybe, I don't know. I've never really thought about it, but it's surprising that, on the surface it makes sense. I only, what's it say here? It's only about 20%. It's not like they're asking, a whole group of 16 to 25. These are people that are in this science technology, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you said overall, probably the percentage would be even lower.
Yeah. And so, they just say medicines, I guess, I can kind of see why that is, because it's like, it just seems so intangible when you're in the 20. Oh, I must be super smart to work at these places. And you do, but you can get there, right? So
Yep.
I think that's fascinating. And then I will say it said social media second only to job search on the website. So, right, if I know Julie's on here with us, so it sounds like according to this UK thing, it was website searches followed by social media, then the traditional job fairs and school career portals and company websites. So when they say job search websites, I wonder if
Probably
that's,
things like Indeed and stuff like that,
yeah,
and
LinkedIn
those.
is in that category, maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess long gone are the days when you do a cover letter and a resume and mail it to someone, John.
Or fax it.
Maria, no, Julie said that. Fax it.
Yeah.
Wow, I guess.
We definitely see that in the world of talent acquisition, that Gen Z connects with a purpose and that they find that purpose when they're looking for jobs through storytelling. And so these social media channels are able to tell a story that then spark interest, that then really drives behavior to learn more about organizations. So even us at KCAS, and you're reading the stats, so this isn't relevant for just Gen Z, because Gen Z, as you mentioned, will take more stock in the channels TikTok and Instagram versus LinkedIn. So, the Gen X generation and the millennial generation really kind of, I think, was a catalyst for LinkedIn, because that was the first step out of just sending a resume and really having a large platform. And now it's really taken, another leap as, kind of Maslow's hierarchies of needs in regards to what is my purpose, and finding organizations to connect with that. And the ones that are doing it well by telling their story are getting a lot of, the players that they're looking for, regardless of industry, just based on that demographic, because the Gen Zs just started outpacing the baby boomers.
Yeah.
So,
No.
so
Yeah, it's
Julie,
fascinating.
sorry, go on, Dominic.
No, you first.
So in terms of what you've seen, Julie, what the findings from this report was, the ABPI recommended that farmers explore the appropriate use of social media channels to provide trusted, accessible, and authentic careers content that demystifies, showcases relatable and diverse role models, and reaches new or previously remote audiences. That content might include short behind-the-scenes videos that highlight employee stories and their daily routines. So again, you're selling the company in a way that relates to your potential applicants.
Yeah, that's definitely right. Anything that touches the heartstrings, becomes a motivator. And we see it more specifically in the younger generations that we're bringing on, at KCAS, at that analyst level as they're coming into the organization. We even had to revamp, our recruiting strategy a few years ago. Dominic, you might remember, building bridges. And, we had a really, intense college recruiting strategy that really the digital stage has it's not replaced it, but it's enhanced it, because we're able to tell our story really well prior to any candidate interaction. And so you really are bringing people to the table through your messaging and, your brand values, which is the first thing that kind of hits somebody if they know the industry they're looking for.
Yeah, no, I do remember it, Julie, and it's like, and we're going to move off this because it's for time's sake, but it's fascinating that this Gen Zers they either want like a TikTok, Instagram video that's 30 seconds long, or they want like a 90-minute or even longer podcast. I don't know if you knew that, Julie. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like it's just like what gone are the day like gone are the days of the 90-minute movie, right? Or I don't know, but like it's just or really short. That just seems like wild to me that the attention span is either less than 30 seconds or I want to dig in for 90 minutes to 2 hours. That's why, Joe Rogan's podcast is the number one in America. And sometimes that thing goes on forever, but then it makes sense, right? Even if you go to our website today, we have a lot of those little kind of TikTok-y things. And what I think it's going to happen is we might need to, you might need to tap into John and I a little more. Maybe we got to make some more little videos for you. Is what
No, you've wanted to be a TikTok star. This is the evolution of Dominic.
I don't even have a TikTok account. I don't even know where to start. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Facebook. But that's not news to anybody on here, I suppose. So, John, any last thoughts on this one? Or Julie, thanks for jumping in.
I would just say, like I said, just one last thing from the report. Basically said their conclusion was Gen Z values transparency and real life experience over polished corporate messaging. So that's all part of it. But I mean, I think to take it away from the job seeking, it is really helpful. And it's only happened to me a couple of times in the almost 20. How many years I've been doing this? 30 years, sorry. You can see my memory's going because I'm old. We had a couple of our clients when the drug was approved, and they came and did a presentation on site and talked about what the drug did, and here's the people it benefited. And at least in one of those presentations, they had a film of patients who had been whose quality of life had been improved by that drug. And so that was a really valuable experience for people who are spent day in, day out of the lab, not really sort of just doing their experiments without necessarily thinking about what the downstream effect of that is. And that was always a really good experience. Like I said, it only happened a couple of times, but that I can see the value of that kind of thing for people considering this career.
It's funny, John, and we can segue off this, but we're investing more in our internal and external kickoff calls for that very reason, John, right? We've always had a desire to try to make sure the analyst understood what they were doing and not just being a pair of hands, but now we're doing it with purpose. And we're going to start asking clients to give more on their kickoff calls, a little bit more of like a 5 to 10 minute opportunity to go over the way their drug works, so that we oftentimes will get a slide or something, but we want them to hear it in real time.
But it's almost the additional piece is, and it's always interesting when we touch on rare disease drugs, because you read about this disease, and honestly, because it's rare, it's not something you really know much about. Yeah. So as part of the research for this, I'll be saying, it's a rare disease drug. Inevitably you end up reading what the path of life, or loss of functions, things like that. And I think that's the really important stuff to get across to people. And it isn't just rare disease. Obviously it's true of other conditions as well. It's just rare disease is a really good example of what it's like. And you see it hits young people, they start off a certain way, but then they lose this ability, and that it tells you how debilitating the condition is without the drug that you're working on. That's where I think the value. It's really good to know mechanism of action, but to really say this is how the person benefits. They don't lose motion. If this drug, basically because it delays any onset of symptoms, their quality of life is better. Like I said, that's the value to any of us.
I know what you mean. There was one client in the rare disease space that showed us a video of what a child was like without their therapeutic, and they couldn't hold their head up. They had all these like enzyme therapeutic space, and they had all these, and then progressively here they showed them. So that oftentimes it's very cyclical, right? The child appears to be almost normal after 6 months or something like that, or 3 months, and then slowly but surely you're going to notice they can't do things as they progress. maybe within a couple months they're going the wrong way with their progression. They get on the therapeutic and it's restored. Man, it's tear jerking. And then at the life sciences PA about 2 years ago, got to meet one of the first patients to receive a CAR T cell therapeutic, and the person was there, and we gave him a standing ovation. It was an 8-year-old that was now 10, 2 years free of their disease due to this 2 injections with a T cell. So I mean, these things will make you cry, John, is what that'll do. It's really it's fabulous stuff. And periodically we do get testimonies from patients and things like that, and that's ideal. And stay tuned. I feel like we've had a few moments where, we've celebrated some of our successes with some of our sponsors, which are great things that we do as an organization as well. But with that, let's move towards how great an organization we are, right? We'll move into our main portion, and got a few special guests with us today. And I hope you guys are getting yourself ready, because I'm going to turn my attention to you. And John, maybe you want to go over the agenda first, or do we need to do that first? Or we just?
No, I think I'll just say a bit of background to this. We obviously, the last podcast we had Jeff Goddard on, and when we're pulling this together, we're trying to think of a blanket a subject to talk about. And when we were talking to Jeff, it actually made sense to turn into two-parter, but have additional people come and talk on the subject. And the general title is KCAS Strategy for Balancing Growth with a Good Employee Experience. So Jeff talked through a lot of pieces in terms of harmonization across sites and identifying, good partner organizations, things like that. And so for this time, it's touching more on the human experience and some of the processes that drive the company. And so we've got Maria Nelson, Chief Financial Officer, and Julie Deane, the Chief People Officer, to talk us through this.
Yeah, so Maria, you're going to draw the short straw. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, give us a little background in your current role.
Sounds good. So I am Maria Nelson, Chief Financial Officer, and I have been here at KCAS for almost 10 years. And I like to, I guess, kind of, make it clear on my role. I'm usually, when I'm in the room, I'm the token non-scientist in the room, is what I like to say. So that was definitely the case when I came to KCAS. We were about 45 to 50 people. Now we're around 400. So there are a few more of us in the organization who are not scientific, but most of us are a lot of PhD scientists at our organization. So it's just been fun over the last 10 years to get to see the organization grow. Still a scientific organization, but we really look at science as a business too. And that's kind of what I'm here to share a little bit about today.
Yeah, Maria, I forgot you were HR and accounting when you joined us, weren't you?
I mean, it was everything at 45 people, right, Dominic? You were here. That's right. Yeah, you were here then too. So
yeah, that was good times. Okay, Julie, tell us about yourself.
Well, hi there. Thanks so much for having us today. So yes, Julie Deane, Chief People Officer, and I am about a month away from 4 years here at KCAS. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that journey's been like. And Maria had it in good shape for this team when we came on board. So going to talk about how we scaled this organization on the HR side.
Yeah, we were doing well, but Julie, it's fascinating how Maria, you did fantastic, but two feet and two canoes is going to split you, sort of. And I think since Julie's kind of come on board, we've certainly stomped on the gas. But let's, John, we covered some backgrounds and roles here. The first item I'm seeing is going to maybe be directed towards Julie, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. So it's talking about building a scalable HR function within the organization. And this agenda was very much built between Julie and Maria in terms of what we wanted to cover here.
Tell us a story, Julie, right? So it doesn't, and then we'll turn to you, Maria, but go ahead and tell it, because it has been fascinating to see what you've done.
Well, when private equity Vitruvian came in, they had a commitment to the organization to invest in a, bigger team for the people operations group. And so really the first order of business and the number one concern that we needed to look at as a growing organization with the investments that were coming in and the space that we're in was talent acquisition, and how were we going to be able to get people in the door and then retain our key talent. And really to get that done, to get things to scale, now that we have the investments and more resources to do that, we, put some things in place that really allow the people operations team on the TA side to get to know the candidates at a screening level a little bit more deeper for the hiring managers, started recording interviews so that hiring managers could see for themselves. I'm a big advocate of candidates being able to sell themselves instead of recruiters internally typing notes and trying to sell the candidate. So that was a real big win from the beginning, not to mention completely, educational for me as I played the part of interviewing in the beginning all of our leaders. So that was great, putting them through the process and really kind of creating what we talked about before, that personalized touch and what the candidates would be going through. So the TA experience from, in the middle of the journey, once we were getting to the logistics and the videos, were an important part of that, and really being able to put more leverage behind our employer brand. So with that came refining our brand values, which we've done as an organization, and really bringing those to life and leveraging our existing, customer brand that we had that was strong in regards to talent being able to find us so we can tell our story. So we did that, and we made our investment through the employment brand journey, but also the tools that we would need to become relevant to the broader candidate base. So we've seen a great uptick in candidate flow since I've been here. Just to give you an idea, pre-investment, they were working without applicant tracking systems, and now we get somewhere on average between 1,000 and 2,000 candidates a month, depending on what positions we're hiring for. And so we're able to really create a database of future talent and existing talent at all times. Yes, this is the protector in here. She won a job, I guess.
No, but did you say you get, how many, was that 500?
It really does vary. We've had months where we've gone up to 4,500. Corporate positions will always generate high candidate flow, typically. And so the more of those that you have, the more come through. But really, we had to work on how to refine from our job posting standpoint and really what message we were sending in regards to technical skills to really work on that quality of candidate. And so we set some benchmarks for ourselves that we've committed to for the organization and the board on time to fill and age of requisitions. Not probably different than what you all experience in a sales cycle and lead generation. We kind of run a similar pipe, right? Yeah. And so we're able to fill those. Our average time to fill is around 28 days, and industry standards about 45 days. And a lot of that is through what we did strategically in the beginning to tell our brand story, and then put the tools and resources behind it and really just simplify the process to drive that high value candidate experience.
So in my previous organization, we used to advertise positions, and you get resumes through, but you really didn't have much quality. It was a lot. You had to really filter through a lot of chaff. So when you say you get 1,000 resumes for a position, I mean, is that what's your a decent percentage?
The denominator is a different thing, right? So we have 1,000, resumes. We're not gonna have 1,000 qualified applicants.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so what kind of success rate do you have in terms of those initial 1,000?
Yeah, I can tell you when we'll talk scientific, because I think that's more relevant for this. Probably somewhere between 10 and 15% of applicants would pass the initial screen, right? Like, okay, we've met with the leader. These are the top specs. We're going to give them a phone interview, a phone screen, video screen, and then see how they present themselves. But we also put a pretty heavy emphasis, once we've gotten to that point from a skills standpoint, on what those behaviors look like and how they're translating to us at KCAS based on the brand pillars that we've identified for success.
It's great. I love it, Julie. I love that you're taking a approach like it's a selling cycle or a scientific approach. Absolutely awesome. But thanks for that. We're going to turn our attention back to Maria here for a second. But anything else you want to add there, Julie? I mean, I haven't been here as long as I have. It's palpable. A lot of external people coming up to me, giving a lot of props to what we're doing, and really just having overall a good experience when they engage us. And then I'll say, you kind of, I'll give a shout out to John Bucksath. When he first got here, we had beliefs that it was hard to recruit to this area. And he looked and said, I was in Columbia, Missouri, and you city,
Yeah,
what the heck are you talking about? And then he brought that, you gotta do it as a team, right? He
right.
quoted recruit like a Division I football team. And that always stuck with me. It's like, wow, as somebody who's a leader in the company, I'm out there. I really should be trying to recruit people. So I always, Julie, if it makes you feel any better, frequently at WRB or AAPS, I'll look at somebody and who's impressing me and I'll say, you looking for a job? Kind of half joking, half feeling them out. But any parting thoughts or last moments here, and we'll get back to you in a minute. But we're going to turn
Yeah,
off.
I think that's good. We'll hand it to Maria.
Awesome. So Maria, we got something called the cure, and maybe John, maybe you can cue it up the right way because that's an internal thing. But Maria, no different than Julie. We're a highly process driven and sophisticated CRO. John, why don't you cue this up for Maria, and we'll go from there.
I'm largely going to go with what is on the paper, and it's basically measuring efficiency and planning for capacity, and cure is part of our forecasting, and really how does that drive our hiring decisions, and this is really for Maria to talk through and say how we work through this.
Sure. Well, let me back up a little bit to how it really relates to everything that Julie just went through for us. So, if you think about us as an organization here, we've built this amazing talent acquisition engine, but the big question, right, is how many people do we need? So what are we asking talent acquisition? What positions are we asking them to fill for us? Because that really is a balance. And like you said, we manage to a forecast here quite a bit. And so that's also really how we keep lead times short for our clients, so they're not having a long wait time when they come to us with an urgent need. And so we have you've mentioned the word cure a couple times, so let me get that curiosity out for everyone. It is an internal term, but it stands for CURE, so capacity utilization resource evaluation. So it's kind of just a little acronym we've created internally for how we measure our capacity. So at any given time, the finance side has become so operational and just so closely intertwined with our scientific teams that we're really working with them on a weekly basis and meeting and looking with commercial at what do we see out in that pipeline as far as what's coming to us from a forecast perspective. So we use the word revenue a lot. We call it revenue, but really it's studies that clients are bringing to us and projects, and those can vary in time and scope and size. But we've got to figure out a way to staff appropriately to those projects that are coming in. And to do that, we have to know what our capacity is in the lab. So what we kind of created was a capacity model that we run. And part of, as we became part of the Vitruvian investment in 2021, we really saw, okay, growth is going to be coming faster than we were used to, right? So we kind of took this model and grew it as a way to measure capacity, but then we were able to scale it too as we made acquisitions and we brought on the Philadelphia team and the Lyon, France team. So all of our sites use this method of looking at their capacity. So we're looking at the forecast and saying what work is out there. And this really allows us to make sure that months in advance we can see what's coming and then appropriately give that talent acquisition team time to go out and find the proper talent that we need to service our clients and keep our lead time short. So what the cure is made up of, I mean, at its base, it's not real complicated. It's just kind of saying how many days are there in a month, business days to work, how many hours are there in a day, what's an average hourly rate that we want to use, and then how many people do we have to perform that work. And then we put in some other, tweaks to it. Like we're saying, okay, there might be here for an 8-hour day, but they're going to have a couple administrative meetings. So we might discount that a little bit. So we put a calculation together. And what it does is it shows us, okay, with this amount of people in this group, we should be able to produce this many projects, this much work, this much revenue. And we look at it a couple different ways. And so it gives us a general idea of our capacity so that we can effectively hire to it. And where I think for us, that has really related back to the employee experience, which is kind of the theme of what we're talking about here overall today, is that it's not going to be a good employee experience if there are not enough people for too much work to go around, or too many people for not enough work to go around, right? So this capacity planning is something that, anybody I can get in front of in our organization, I want to talk to them about. And we've actually, pretty openly talked with clients about it too, because I think it's a lot of what makes us special, and being able to really always, be there in the timing that they need, and get done for them in the time that we say we will. So
Yeah, and from our perspective, when we're in calls with clients, it's really helpful to know that we can say our lead times are kept low and here's what's driving it. And we spend a lot of time on forecasting as our part to feed the models, etc. So we can say what's coming down the pipe. But it really is it's valuable to have all this behind us, to just, that you can say honestly to a customer, our lead times are a few weeks, and that is the case. We're not saying something that we can't back up with fact.
yeah, and it's tough, right? Because it's all also has to kind of, at some point, you got to come down to a law of averages, but nothing about science is a law of averages. So we're going to have projects that sometimes we're solving a big, hairy problem, and sometimes we're doing something that could be more repetitive, And so we have to find a way so that's kind of where the back end of the cure comes internally. It's never going to be that perfect hourly rate that you're looking at, So after the month closes, we usually are looking at it month by month. We're going to go back at the month and say what projects were completed, what work was done and billed, and then how close did we come to our capacity model? And if we exceeded that capacity model, or if we missed that capacity model, what are the reasons? So that's more an internal look back, but really doing that and looking at those variances just helps us retool our model to make it stronger, based on what we see, but also to make business decisions, right? Because if something is taking us, one place I've seen it impact us in the past, if something's taking us too long, and we see that come up in a variance cause, that might be a case where, hey, we're going to go look at investing in some robotics for that area or something, right? So we use this capacity modeling for much more than just driving how many people do we need based on the growth that we see coming, but also, what other investments might we need? What's causing us to miss our cure rate or exceed our cure rate? So it's definitely pretty big central part of how we manage ourselves here at KCAS.
Yeah, it's on the commercial side, we run a forecast that's really kind of the fuel for some of this, and it's why I could give 1,000 reasons why I love working at KCAS Bio. So sometimes you in other jobs, I may have done some of these exercises, and we hold people accountable for them on our side, right? We're looking at our business development team and making sure they understand what's real, what's not. We're trying to help them mold that and shape that, and oftentimes that information might not get used. I get to proudly look at them and say, hey, this is really important what we're doing because of the back end here, because it triggers a lot of things, right, Maria and Julie? So if we see a bolus of work coming, or even worse, if there's not enough work, we can adjust accordingly on our side. But we don't plan for work month by month. The bolus of work is, our forecast is accurate out to about 6 months with like 90+% accuracy, right? So we're oftentimes, you don't even have to, maybe Maria, you can oftentimes look at a given service line, a given pod, and think, oh boy, they're going to need to hire, right? Is that a fair statement? You could almost see it coming at times. Is that true, an accurate statement to you? Or,
Yeah, definitely.
well, I
I
know,
mean,
I know I can, and that's
I
when we start to trigger things. That's when we'll engage HR and things like that. But it is fascinating how well it all works. And maybe my point is how important it is. And if there are some of our own internal members listening to this, it's just not an exercise. This data gets used. It's very important.
It just shows how important it is to get things right from day one. So when we're in those scoping calls, you need it's really critical to get an accurate idea of what the client is looking for. So then you're scoping correctly, such that it then goes into the forecast correctly. So you're planning correctly
Yeah.
based on that. So
yes.
every step of the process is really important.
Well, and I think, Dominic's definitely correct that it does seem it's unusual anymore these days where we get caught by surprise and we've got work that's here and we don't have enough
Yeah,
people to do it. That's, I think, what you
it
mean.
still
We
happens.
usually can see it. It does
Not
in
like it
pockets.
used to, Maria, right?
No, not like it used to, but it does in pockets. But
but
interestingly, I wanted to just mention, we sometimes, if that happens, we see it coming enough, and so we have been able to pull levers on cross training between other departments, because we do have this visibility to say, whoa, this department just got flooded with a lot of work that came in that needs to be done fast. Maybe we can pull from this group over here where we can see they're not flooded from the capacity
And we're
we
ready,
need.
Maria, right? We are ready for it when it does. We have mechanisms. But
Yeah,
John, you want to add
yeah.
something?
I was just going to say, I mean, it one of the challenges that bioanalytical isn't always routine, and where we inevitably, even when you think everything's running fine, you move from standards QCs into patient samples, you get hit with a whole bunch of problems that you weren't anticipating, and then all of a sudden that those resources that you thought would free up are consumed in a way that you weren't expecting them to be. So it has an impact that way.
And I think what makes it unique is our commercial and operations team have lots of channels of communication. And I think that's an important driver here. We trust each other is what that ends up developing into. So any last words from Maria before we, because I think this leads nicely into like our next kind of, because it all ties together, right? We're all I like to think of it as we have a 3-year plan that's rolling, and at the start of every year, our CEO lines us all up on the starting line, and he fires that gun, and we're all aligned, and we're all working on our improvements and growth and progress and things like that. But it's always with the corner of our eyes thinking about our teammates. I know that's something I emphasize on the commercial side. We're not going to win business at the expense of our operations team or even our HR team or even our accounting team, if that made sense, because that's a key thing. Meaning we just don't say, well, throw it over the fence and hope it goes through. We're not that type of organization. John and I both pride ourselves on saying, hey, we might not be the right fit. We'll turn away work. We don't like doing that, but if it's not within our wheelhouse, we don't want to touch it. So with that,
if I can just add to that, yeah, that's really important from my perspective in the role of a scientific advisor role. Having run an operation before, the last thing you want to do is give your operational team something that you know is going to be an absolute nightmare to solve. It's critical to really filter those projects out.
Yeah. John, it's almost required for an SA to have spent a
Yeah.
decade in an operational lead role, isn't it? For that very reason.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So you've already walked. Although we're in business development now, we've walked in people's shoes that we're helping to find the work to feed them, type of thing.
All right. So if we, as we move on through our agenda, and this has been a lot of fun, we got plenty of time to keep going here. So we have a hiring for capacity and talent acquisition topic. We kind of touched on that a little bit, but maybe I'll turn my attention to Julie a little bit. You want to talk about our onboarding, training, development, and maintaining employee engagement.
Sure. That's one of my favorites. I don't know if you all knew this, but I came out of the hospitality world. And so something that is just ingrained in me and I take really serious as we're looking at HR and from the TA standpoint, as we'll talk about onboarding, training, and development, is really driving high value employee experiences. And so we use that from the beginning when they become a candidate to when they become an employee. And so that's our kind of moral compass for the HR team, how we make decisions. Is it driving a high value employee experience? And one thing that I'm really proud of that's been put in place here at KCAS is the way that we are onboarding at this stage. So again, we infused some resources and really stood up a kind of non-traditional training team that supports the operations with 2 lab trainers, and we have a senior director of OD and training, and they really revamped a pretty solid orientation process, which is a part of onboarding. And onboarding, for the record, is typically about 90 days in the mind of a new employee. And so that first 2 weeks is critical, and really the first 2 days is even more critical. So we have a back-to-back orientation that we put in place that we scaled using software technologies through LinkedIn Learning, really getting out of the antiquated approach of somebody standing up there and just facilitating, but also driving self accountability on what it is there is to learn. And so through those courses that we start during the orientation and continue through onboarding and really the employee life cycle, we have a variety of tools in our belt there that we can provide at different stages in the employee career. And so that's been a great scalable solution for us, as opposed to just expensive executive coaches, for a lot of different people, that we're able to really mitigate and refine who needs what and at what stage. That'll tie to our, any employee relations issues that we're having. Really, again, just thinking of this as an ongoing onboarding for an employee. And so, really, also, I think another nugget that has been good here for KCAS is taking that really physical and emotional labor off of our frontline scientists during those first 2 weeks when lab skills training is the most critical. And so, the people operations team really handles that. We have two designated trainers to offload that from the business and get them ramped up on their SOPs and things that they need to know, and really also kind of embedding our brand values at the same time through that journey. And really, another thing that I'd like to mention, Dom and John, your scientist brains, HR people, we're cut from a little bit of a different cloth, right? And so we've spent a great deal of time and energy into really trying to understand our population. And so through this development stage, we have a lot of offerings that we provide to our leaders in the structure of, EQI, from emotional intelligence, strength finders, DISC profiles, to really give the benefit to the leaders and to the employee to create kind of empathy within their own teams on who it is that I'm working with and how do people think and how do they tick. And so we take that pretty seriously and hold that, on a high shelf as we're looking to understand how can we relate better, how can we know each other better, and how can we, again, drive this employee experience to exceed, what you were looking for here at KCAS.
Yeah, I love it. It is definitely a real improvement, and people who get on board to talk about it, Julie, they always feel so welcomed. You get a buddy system, and even setting an expectation that it's a 90-day process, it eases people's, kind of anxiety is the word that comes to mind, because everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody wants to have an impact, but it's hard to assimilate oneself into a GLP laboratory. Even if you have a lot of experience, you got to learn the KCAS Bio way is what I say, right? You got to learn and that's the whole way we've onboarded. And you even talked about taking former scientists or analysts, and that they're on your team. So you do have scientists on your team to help make that onboarding experience a little better. And that really has, it sounds so simple, but so few people do it. And you also need to have the right scientist who's willing to move into kind of that role, right? So it requires a little bit of, elbow grease is what comes to mind. But
yeah, and those transferable skills, right? On where we can place people in the organization. I think we do a good job of that here too at KCAS with internal mobility and promotions. Approximately 25% of our people are getting promoted year over year that go through, on the scientific side, the TDP plan, right? So that's, again, another structured process that was scalable as people were reaching milestones in their own development. How autonomously can they work? That gave them a really clear path on their trajectory, which there's a yearning for that, and a thirst that we're able to meet.
Yeah, no, and I think we're obviously with commercial roles, lab roles, there's the vast majority are out of the lab and in the commercial, although there are periodically a few people who've gone back into operations from our side of the fence, which is just tells you so much about KCAS Bio that we actually had a PM move into an associate director role not too long ago, right? So there is some movement back to it, which
You just hit a mute button, Dominic.
Sorry, I inadvertently did that. We value individuals a lot. Sorry about all that, guys. So with that, thanks, Julie. Maria, before we start to go on to our next topic, you want to add anything around some of the what was just said there? Any comments? I know you've been here a long time. I'm sure you have some thoughts for us. No.
Oh, I can give you thoughts all day, Dominic,
Yeah.
but let's yeah. No, I think just just kind of want to stress how unique I think that our teams do a good job of making it look easy. Certainly our talent acquisition team does a good job of making it look easy, but all of this, so much of this is really based on what you touched on earlier, which is just the internal communications and having teams that feel comfortable, speaking up and talking with each other and picking up the phone, well, or the Teams chat, I guess, right? And saying, hey, I've got this problem and what are we going to do about it? Because we can put all the systems in place that we want, but if we aren't creating an employee experience that leaves open doors for communication, there's no way that we could have gotten to the point we are now with having all of our sites, really very, very
Mm.
centralized, kind of in all beating to the same drum and walking in the same direction as each other, because ultimately that centralization is what's really going to drive value for our clients. And so I think that everything we've talked about today, from measuring capacity and making sure that we're able and ready to perform for our clients, to making sure that our employees are big cheerleaders of KCAS, that just all goes into driving value for our clients and making sure that we're ready to get their tough jobs done,
Yeah.
no matter where they place their work between all of our sites.
If I could jump, we haven't really touched on it too much, and we've certainly talked about the onboarding process, etc. But one of the big contrasts for me at KCAS compared to my previous employer is the continual focus on employee engagement. So it's not just about that 90-day period. There's lots of things happening where the employees are made to feel valued, and obviously being remote, we miss out a fair amount of it. But it's really noticeable how much is being done on a weekly and monthly basis to keep people engaged with what the company's doing, and just lots of employee gratitude events and things like that. It's really nice to watch.
Yeah, and I think having, as we've grown from really, for the most part, in the last 4 years, has been a large amount of our growth. That's certainly been a challenge as we've added sites, but also having, remote employees, people really all over the globe. Not just that employee experience, but making sure that everybody's following the same processes and everybody's doing things relatively the same way, so that we're providing the same experience to all of the employees and all of the clients, no matter where they are or what they're coming to us for.
Yeah, and it was, I think we could do a podcast on how its own separate one on how we took the Cure model here in Kansas City and started in Philly and then into Lyon, right? That was an experience, and one that I'm sure, it's great today, right, Maria? But it
Yeah,
was it
and
was a new thing, right? Everybody had their own way of kind of doing revenue recognition and systems, and it wasn't that it was that like foreign. It was just more calculated, right, and more, it helped predict things, right? Help to me, the power of the cure, it helps interpret how you're doing and where you. It's kind of like a report card almost, and not that it's meant to be like punitive, but it does allow you to understand where you're getting tripped up, what projects might be tripping you up, and then of course mix of work always impacts things. But maybe one last comment, and then we can take our final topic here, and that comment might be you, Maria, after what I just said there.
yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, every business out there is going to have a way of looking at their capacity and predicting how much work they can take on responsibly. The challenge, is when you acquire new sites, is bringing all of that together. And so I think that's what we've done really well, is brought those sites, really all of us, into the same model, so that we're all looking at it the same way. Because anytime that you have variances inside the same organization, but it differs by site, then you're going to have a differing experience. You might get a different answer. And so it's a matter of kind of keeping the different things that make the different business lines unique, but finding a way to make sure that we're getting the same answer every time, and it's a cohesive path forward
Hmm.
for the company as a whole.
That's a good word, cohesive. Okay, we got one last item on here. We kind of touched on it a little bit. maybe we'll turn our sights to Julie. Tell us a little bit about our internal communications and multi-site centralization. Am I putting you on the spot, Julie? You ready to?
Not at all. I'm ready for that one.
All right, yeah. Tell because it leads in nicely, right? I was talking one thing we did have to have internal communication on and multi-centralization was cure, but even from emails to everything in between,
That's
right?
right.
Julie, it was quite a bit.
And I don't know if this will surprise anybody, but any role I've had, the multiple jobs I've had, the number one employee feedback where companies need to improve is communication. And we pulse that quite frequently here at KCAS. We use an employee survey that really drives our decision-making process at the executive level to then push down to, meet those needs of the workforce. And so from a communication standpoint, again, the evolution as we, when I got here, about 190 employees, we're close to 400 now. And so we had to look at how to do things differently, right? So how to really evolve the newsletters into something that was going to resonate through different channels. And so a big part of that we put in place was how do we identify different elements of communication that will resonate with the right audience at the right time. And so we work pretty diligently, and we do, again, just stating back to when I first started here, we didn't have really an intranet or a central source of truth. So we started with that, started playing ball with what we called Nucleus, to really have an information portal that now we've evolved into our HRIS system, which is HiBob, where we can have a variety of central communications, and everybody relies on HiBob for that. So they know where to go, where to find the calendars, where to find the events, where to find updates, where to find about your well-being. So all those employee-centric type of communications really come out of a system that can feel more automated and consistent for the employee. And then in addition to that, we had to take a look at, emails that are flying, through the company. And so as a company grows, the people that used to send all company emails, maybe that's not the right fit anymore, right? That everybody kind of had, priority for that. So we have a pretty structured process where we wanted to get the employee workforce, accustomed and in a routine on when they receive communications, which is our digest that we do on Mondays, our KCAS digest that'll really outline activities coming up for that week, change management and client audits, things of that nature that are important for the business and our professional brand too. So that's been a really big part. We actually, again, a testament to the company with internal mobility. There was a lady that had been working here for 4 or 5 years that came over to the HR side, and we put internal communications and engagement under people operations to really give it the attention that it deserves. Because back to recruiting, the best recruiting strategy is a retention strategy, and we run somewhere about 13% right now on an industry standard of above 20%. And so, again, listening to that employee voice, putting it to life through communication and different engagement activities.
Yeah, you touched on so many things that are really the 1,000 reasons why I love working here. You kind of glossed over HiBob, but HiBob is awesome.
It is a great tool.
That allows you to see anniversaries, just simple things. Birthdays and shout outs are great, right? It really gives our multi-sites a sense of community and involvement. And even still, we have our middleware, which is Holmes, which allows us to communicate. But HiBob is the platform to brag, right? That's where you get to brag. And then, to me, it's like, I don't need to be a pain in the butt to the HR team because I know where everything is too, Julie, right? So I'm going to applaud you. I don't have to come.
Yeah.
Stuff because I think there's always some activation energy because it's only been about a year since we rolled it out, I feel like. And so I'm sure we're continuing to add some processes there, but it's great. I mean,
yeah, and
title, right? Everything. I can go look up anything and everything that I need. It's really a lot of transparency and you want to know about the company, it's all there for you if you take the time.
I'm glad you like it. I do too.
Yeah. John, anything before we set our sights on Maria?
No, I don't have anything to right now. Let's keep going.
So maybe you can share, because I got, even now I can think of some things that you might want to comment on in terms of internal communication and multi-site centralization.
Yeah, well, I mean, oh gosh, trying to think of something that we haven't covered. I mean, I think it's just when we really, it was
You
2022.
oversee IT too. Sorry. Well, maybe you wanted to go, but you oversee the IT department too. So that's where I was going a little bit. But maybe you continue what you thought there.
Yeah, well, I mean, IT was one of the very first things that we centralized when we grew from really one site that we had been for so long to 3 sites. And so I think IT is the one thing everybody takes for granted, right? It's
Mm.
just supposed to work.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time here it does. And so that was one of the very first things that we centralized. But from the finance side, I would say that in the very early days at both of the sites, I can, just going back to the cure, I can remember having literal whiteboard sessions with our sleeves rolled up and talking about how those sites, looked at their capacity and how did we do it and how was that going to fit together. And so that still really just was the central piece. I think all the other pieces, you just beyond the capacity planning and how that affects operations, and then the employee experience and how the employees come on board and begin serving our clients as one. The other things are the things we kind of take for granted, and they're not easy either, right? But it's getting that IT structure the same between all of the sites so
Mm.
that we're all looking at the same picture. And then obviously the financials as well, so that clients aren't, they're getting a single viewpoint too as well. So those were, you mentioned homes. That's been a huge initiative for us because that uh, business planning department is under finance as well, but that touches every single piece of our organization. So all
Yeah.
of the sites, we've had to work to get everybody in the exact same project management system, which is really how we're able to do that capacity planning
Yeah.
between all of the sites, is using the same database of information
Yeah.
that
That's
starts
all
with
right.
commercial, goes
Yeah.
all the way through
And
to
Holmes is our
finance.
SharePoint that it doesn't matter where you are in our organization, we can communicate and see if you need to, from where a sample might be to a contract to where things are, right? Everything doesn't matter which site you are. We're all going to the same place. That was a huge initiative. But John, did you have something to add there before I go on more about?
No, keep going.
Yeah, no, and I think Maria, it's funny you kind of glossed over some of all those critical, not glossed over, but like even just getting emails harmonized, getting like, I remember when we had to adapt Watson Limbs into Lyon, right? Just things like that are just huge initiatives for you and your team.
Yeah.
And you said it well. You're like, oh, it's just supposed to work, right?
That's right. That's the stuff you want to work. Well, now
Yeah.
putting a Watson Limbs into Lyon was not in the too far distant path, but I mean, I think that is, one other piece to the organization that we've stood up in the last 2 years is a PMO, so project management organization.
Mm.
And so we actually have an
Slow down.
entire,
That's where I was going to go. Tell us
yeah,
PMO.
an
You said it so
entire,
fast. Yeah. What is PMO?
so you'll see them if you start looking in much
I
larger
mean, I know what it is. It's
organizations.
our audience. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
it's our audience that doesn't know. But go ahead. Sorry. Go
you
ahead.
anyone who's in a real big organization has probably seen even expansive PMO orgs. So what ours is really is just a handful of us, but what it's doing is going out and saying, okay, whenever we have a project that needs to be rolled out, so the putting Watson Limbs into Lyon site while upgrading the Watson Limbs at the KC site at the same time, those two had to be done in tandem. So that is really a cross department initiative, and you've got a whole lot of people that need to talk to each other, and they all need to be running on the exact same project plan and Gantt charts to get the project done on time, on budget, because we had um, people waiting for that Watson Limbs to be installed in the Lyon site, and the KC site had to get theirs on board and upgraded first. And so what we did was we put a kind of a global project manager on top of that through the PMO org, and they're just reporting and making sure everything's on track. If something needs to pivot, then they're kind of sounding an
Mm,
alarm, and really helping to make sure that the sites are talking and communicating internally, and that we don't have any ships passing in the night. So
yeah.
not really unlike the program management function, right, that we might have
Yeah.
on the client side. It's kind of having that for our internal corporate initiatives to make sure that when we do see a new project that needs to go in, maybe that's a result of a month-end cure analysis. We see a variance that's being caused, and we're going to go resolve it with a project. If that crosses over a lot of groups and, oh my gosh, over several sites, then it really needs higher level
Oh,
oversight to make sure that everybody's got the same information.
yeah. So we're going to be rolling out a new critical reagent tracker, and this is perfect for it, right? So like, I don't know if you were aware of that, but we're beta testing that and so forth. So we'll be adding to your, you can, I guess I'm giving you, maybe you knew about that already, Maria, but that's
Yes,
the calculating one, right? That we're
yeah,
still working out, but it's a perfect example of why we need this, right? We might not be 4,000 employees, but we are 400. The sun never sets on our company is how we kind of think about it. And when you go to implement something like that, it does require what you just described, a program manager of it, right? Or so that you avoid frustrations and miscommunications or even paralysis. Like, well, I don't know what to do here, so I don't know who to call. I just don't do it, right? That's what we don't want to do when you try to implement a new process. So,
right. And I think when you have an org of this size, I mean, also we might be 400 people today, but what this team is constantly thinking about is, okay, let's make sure that the specs of this project are also set up so that this can scale with us. Because how is this going to look when we're 800 people? Because I
yeah,
don't really want to make an investment
no,
today at 400 people
yeah,
that can't also scale to double
no,
our size.
no,
And
amen.
so, kind of making sure that those dollars are being spent in the right places, based on scalability. And so, you gave the example of the reagent tracker. We're getting all sorts of projects from all across the organization all the time. And so what we're also doing is really keeping a list of all the project requests and kind of determining when there's limited dollars, where does the investment go? And so figuring out what to move forward on next. And then once we do make that decision as an organization, helping shepherd that through to make sure that it's successful.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. I mean, such a big, we have our scientific minds on, but I promise you, we're very appreciative of everything you're doing because I don't know, a lot of it looks like Greek to me. But
I, absolutely, with all this being done in the background for me to pick up and work with later it's so nice, so helpful.
yeah, and you're right. At most orgs, it was like you kind of had a lot of leaders had to do both, right? You were like, well, there's this, and now I got to manage my day job along with this additional piece. We have resources and help here, and people talk about communication and things like that, but there's no, I rarely feel like I'm blindsided by anything. And if I am, it's my fault. I just didn't pay attention in that meeting I was in, right? But so as we wind down here, any last thoughts? Maybe Julie, you got anything you want to touch on here, or any last parting words for our audience as we move towards putting you two in the hot seat?
Oh, God. Well, how could I have anything to say with knowing that's coming up?
No.
No, I think, no, this has been great to be able to kind of share the behind the scenes, and hopefully it's helpful for people that don't work in those support departments that are, out there making the business happen, and life-saving drugs and solutions that, we're behind the scenes really trying to craft the best possible, employee experiences to help keep you motivated and disciplined in your craft.
All right. Okay. Don,
So
any
move
last
on.
words, or am I going right into the hot seat?
I think you go ahead and do your worst.
Let's see who gets to draw the lucky straw here. We're gonna start with what's our favorite dish to make, and we're gonna turn to Maria. What's your favorite dish to make? What do you got?
I already know the answer. I know the answer.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to see if Julie knows it correctly. Okay,
Well,
that'll be interesting if she
all
You
right.
want me?
does.
You want me to guess first?
Oh my gosh, yes. This can be terrible if you're right, though, because that means I am a creature of habit.
Is it butter chicken?
It's close. You're close. It's Thai
Okay.
curry, which can very easily be confused with a butter chicken.
All right.
Well, you got a
Yes, it's Thai
story
curry,
behind that.
Dominic.
That surprised me a little bit with that.
Did
Huh.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I-
it's actually a product of how easy it is. It's really quite simple to throw it all in a pot with whatever leftover vegetables and proteins you have and add a bunch of spice and coconut milk and you're ready to go. So,
okay. And you don't use an Instapot or anything, because I used to make like a curry in my Instapot. Are you still using it on how are you making?
oh, no, I do it just in a big, La Crusette, like one of those big
Okay.
stainless pots and just
Yeah.
kind of let it simmer. But it's really pretty quick. And my kids are pretty adventurous eaters. And so they like it spicy. So I
All
can't,
right.
nobody complains. So
You can make it like Thai hot if you need to, huh? You can.
that's right. Thai hot. Yes.
My favorite. If I'm not sweating when I'm done eating it, it's not worth it. All right, Julie, how it's fascinating that I want Julie, Maria, you want to take a guess at Julie's dish, or or is that not going to happen?
So I'm not going to be able to guess hers because I can tell you she sends me like pictures of what she's cooking, and so she prides herself in variation. So it is not possible to guess what she's going to say.
So that's like my life.
Yeah.
We my wife and I tend to send photos back and forth with our eldest son in terms of what we've cooked. He's very much a griller, whereas I'm much more traditional oven and stove type stuff. But there's a lot of toing and froing in terms of what each of us are doing. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, Julie. I'm definitely fascinated to know what your favorite thing to make is.
She's right. I mean, I don't make the same thing twice very often because I love to cook and I don't follow recipes. So I'm just like, that is my science is in there cooking. But
maybe give us your top 3.
yeah, I'm going to. So I'm kind of in a breakfast mode right now. So I've been making frittatas. So I made I'm on to this one right now. It was a smoked salmon and sun-dried tomato, mushroom frittata with fresh mozzarella and basil that you just do in the cast iron skillet. That was really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did something similar recently where I am very much a recipe follower, but once I've got a recipe, try out how it's written first time, and then I'm going to go off and tweak things. And so I found this, it was like a ham hash with baked eggs, did that, and then I would also be in parallel doing quite a lot of pulled pork, where it's like the vinegary North Carolina pulled pork. And I thought, if I replace the ham with the pulled pork, that can be quite good. So
yeah,
a few times, which actually worked out really, really nicely. Anyway, back to you and your other dishes.
I've said
you tell what I'm like with food. I'm fascinated with food. If we did this as a food podcast, you know.
And I like everything to be a shepherd's pie almost. Like I make these barbecue Sunday cups, with like pulled pork in the bottom and then like in a mason jar and then with coleslaw and then with beans. So I'm always just kind of out there experimenting.
We never know what we're going to get. You went from breakfast to
barbecue Sundays.
Yeah, I could see on the picnic table with like these things just kind of ready to go, right? It's like you said a mason jar full of treats. That's awesome.
Yeah, fruit salad with a coconut whipped cream. I mean, I just go all in.
Yeah.
I went to ASMS years ago in Baltimore, and there was a place I read about that did like a pulled pork in like a tall glass, and I can't remember what else was in it, but it was one of those things you had to experience at least once.
You're making me think of like a street taco in the Frito bag or Dorito bag. You ever see that? That's kind of, sometimes you can get that sort of.
Oh yeah, when I go camping, I like to do that. I call it the walking taco.
The walking taco, or even if you've ever been to like a Slim Chicken around here, the desserts are in a mason jar there. They're desserts.
Oh.
Yeah, if you next time you're there. But no, and then even frittatas, I love taking like leftover barbecue and making a frittata. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good idea.
Power breakfast there. Nothing like a little oil to rehydrate that meat. And then in my world, I don't follow a recipe either, Julie, which is the reason why they don't let me in the lab anymore. So so let's move on to our set. We'll just, because we are kind of getting a little long here. This will be our last question for you all. Tell us about your favorite adult beverage, and we're going to go with you first, Julie, this time.
I'm so boring though. I mean, my favorite go-to is definitely a good like Pinot Noir. But if I'm going to be adventurous and I'm going to one of our fun like speakeasies or something, I usually like to try something tequila based. So I like a good, spicy margarita or the different flavors that they definitely in patio season. That's kind of a go-to.
Check out the prickly pear margarita. You said spicy, but the prickly pears are good.
Yes.
And then even mezcal can be fun drinks too if you like the tequila.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, and even just ranch water is a good way to go too, right? Club soda.
Mm-hmm. Tequila sunrise on the airplane. Yeah.
That's club soda and alcohol is a good way to, if you're dieting. Yeah, if you're dieting, right? That's my go-to. Okay, Maria, what about you? You got a Although
Well,
I'll remember the Pinot Grigio for you, Julie, if I'm bringing a gift. But maybe,
Pinot
Yeah,
Noir.
Pinot Noir. Don't bring
Pinot
your Pinot
Noir.
Noir.
So,
Grigio.
yeah, you're not going to get many thanks for the Pinot Grigio.
I'm gonna end up drinking it. No, go ahead.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm a purist actually. I know you probably will find that hard to imagine, Dom, but I'm just give me some Kettle One and club soda, maybe
Okay.
with a lime in it, and that's pretty much my
Yeah.
go-to.
I
So
was expecting a
I'm
screwdriver. Maybe is that crazy? Is that like
no,
your Friday
yeah.
drink? No.
I'm a pretty big beer person too, though.
Okay.
My husband and I had a year a while back where I think we went to like over 20 breweries
Oh,
in the
fun.
year. So, love local beer, and Kansas City is certainly had quite a few of those popping up. But I don't think we'll do a year again where we go to 20 breweries because we definitely had to like get on a whole 30 on January day after that. So,
Oh yeah. And there's so many breweries popping up down in the city district there, isn't there? We've got like
oh, they're all
I went to
over.
like
Yeah.
6 one night. I couldn't believe how many were in like walking distance almost, right? I was
Yeah.
taken aback. City Barrels down there, that's a good one. I like that one. Anyhow, any thoughts here from either of you as we start to wrap up, or John, or any maybe we'll do one more. What are our weekend plans? Or we just had the weekend. We're filming on
But yeah, so what's your weekend or what's your July 4th plans? Anything like that?
I bet Maria and I are going to the same place.
We might be.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta hit the lake for the 4th of July.
The lake.
Yep, yep. And if it's a scalding 95 degrees Fahrenheit here in the Midwest region. So with my luck, it'll be raining when we're actually at the lake, but hopefully not.
And what do you guys? Is there, if I recall, if someone's got a pontoon boat or something like that? Are you guys doing water skiing, or what's all going on at the lake?
Yeah, we've got a boat. We've got some jet skis,
Yeah.
fire pits. A lot of just floating off the dock. I got some nieces that are younger that are fun to go hang out with. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is this Smith? Which do you mind sharing? Which I guess you don't have to do that.
Well,
We're,
there's a
we're
place in
Ozarks.
Missouri called the Lake of the Ozarks,
Okay.
yes, and
Yeah.
it's pretty large lake river system.
Oh
So,
yeah. You can get in trouble
yeah.
down there, can't you? Oh yeah. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
you
fun down
can,
in the
but
Lake of the Ozarks.
when you're to the point of taking kids down, you're usually trying to stop all the trouble from
Yeah.
happening at this point in my life. So,
Now you've become that person, huh, Maria?
oh, that's right.
The fun. You're like kryptonite to fun. Is that what your
The
kids
fun
say?
police. I try not to be.
Um, all right, that's great. For me, I'll share 4th of July. I go to Nebraska every year, always do. They typically have live horse racing in my wife's hometown of Columbus, Nebraska, so I get to go
Fun.
live horse
Wow.
racing, which is great. And then one of her cousins lives on a little cove, so we get to do some tubing and boating. And it's just a wonderful weekend. Probably get around to golfing, but it's usually 100 degrees and I'm in suntan lotion and off mode anywhere I go outside, but overall, I just absolutely love it. You can imagine golfing, gambling, and boating are three things that are just really fun to do when one's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds
How
like
about you,
you're the one
John?
getting in trouble up there, Dominic.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm the one that's in trouble. Yeah.
So is the non-American on here? It's nice to have the time off in July 4th, but we never really plan anything. Except this year, my son who's in Boston and his wife are coming over for the week ahead of it. So we will actually at least try and find something nice to do. Except that the one problem we have, so last year we had our front porch totally rebuilt, so we've been spending a lot of time out there this year. We just had a robin set up a nest in one of my wife's hanging baskets, and so it looks like our porch is off limits for the next month. Well, so that won't be something we're doing.
Oh yeah, you went through a lot with that too, John. Right? And I imagine it's like perfect. Is it super hot there today? You guys getting a lot of?
It's 92 degrees,
Oh
which
boy.
is for here sucks.
Yeah,
Yes.
not everybody has air conditioning, right? You don't have central air in the house, or
No,
do you?
I'm in an 1870s house. We've got boxes in all the windows, and I was hoping there'd be no background noise from the box that's in my office. But the cats are really weird and they don't like the cold house. and so we've had to leave the back door slightly open so they can go onto the back porch and basically toast themselves.
They're like lizards roaming on the rocks, huh?
Yeah, it really is. It's yes, totally different attitude to us. They're like, this air conditioning sucks.
Oh, not my cat. She sits on the vent with the AC. She's so funny.
Don't let them on the front porch, John. They're going to be after that robin.
Yeah,
Or maybe you
that-
should. Then you'll get your porch back.
That's totally off limits. We're going to nurture nature as much as we can.
Oh, it's just the circle of life. Kick the door open. No, I'm just kidding. Get your porch back.
Absolutely not. No.
No, I agree. In fact, there was a robin's nest in front of my house, and me and all the neighbors were out there trying to help out, make sure no one was attacking it. It was wild. If you don't love animals, something's wrong with you. Go ahead.
On that note, I suppose we better wrap up and say thank you very much, Julie and Maria, for joining us. It's been a blast, and it's time to move on till next week or next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming, and we'll see you in the funny pages.